For much more on the bigger situation around the region and emerging from this peace accords now, we're joined by Dr. Yonatan Freeman here, the international relations expert at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Thanks for joining us here. Good to have you again on this topic. Now, I want to get your thoughts to start now. We've had a lot of sort of words to decipher here from this ceremony yesterday. President Trump speaking clearly and seemingly confidently about 5 to 6 other countries to follow. We assume this is based on a lot of groundwork already being done. Do we know which countries those are already?
Well, I think these are the countries that really have a lot to gain from a relationship with Israel in terms of fighting Iran and seeing a way to fight the Iranian threat in their midst. And number two is really the countries that really have a lot of internal problems, challenges that we can help them with. And as you saw in this agreement, a lot of the agreement focuses on help with agriculture, with water, in the medical field. So I think the countries that are really waiting in line are those countries that really need to get in line with the 21st century, and Israel has those tools to make that possible.
Now, on Iran, obviously a lot of focus being put, certainly from the Israeli side, on the threats from Iran, and it strengthens the alliance against Iran now. Does it embolden, perhaps, Israel and its now new allies to take a more aggressive stance against Iran and vice versa? Is Iran more cornered at this point, perhaps more dangerous?
Well, I think that Iran is very weak diplomatically. It's more and more isolated, not just in the Western world, but also in the Arab and Muslim world. I think that this is what we saw yesterday. It wasn't just a peace agreement. It was an agreement that we need a new alliance, a renewed alliance against Iran around the world. And I think this is the first really security alliance that Israel is being publicly invited to join, unlike alliances that were in the past. If it was against Saddam Hussein in the first Gulf War. I think this time the world, the Arab world, the Muslim world wants Israel on its side because Israel has the tools, we have the intelligence, and we have the experience in fighting Iran.
That's a great point. Israel's involvement in those coalitions in the past was a complicating factor, perhaps no longer. Let's talk about the Palestinians for a minute here. So obviously clearly against all forms of this emerging peace now. This peace accord represents, by all accounts, a paradigm shift for the region in terms of how the two sides will interact. But does it actually alter the way the strategies of each side vis-a-vis the other?
Well, I think that what we saw yesterday was a declaration of independence by the UAE, Bahrain, and other Muslim countries that are really seeing it as a positive step. I think that for years, the Palestinians have taken over the foreign policies of many Arab and Muslim countries. And yesterday we're seeing that they're saying no longer that's viable. We want to say UAE first and not Palestine first. I think that this move yesterday can really bring the Palestinians to the negotiating table. It can also bring more investment to them. So I think even though the Palestinians are right now condemning it, I think in time they'll be lauding it and joining the table because they see that's the future in terms of Israel in the Middle East.
And what are some of your predictions about how this relationship will develop now from this point? We've had these warm expressions really seemingly from all sides, all aspects of this. You touched on that a bit here, the business ties, agriculture, all this set to develop tourism, for example. Do you think this will be soon to come, all the developments that are being talked about?
I think there's lots of potential. We have to realize that a country like the UAE has had links with the Western world, with international business. I think that many people in both countries want to establish links. I think it's going to be even more, at least in the first period of this agreement, than what we saw after the peace agreement with Egypt or Jordan. I think that this is a new age. I think that even the coronavirus challenge is really bringing both countries together. I think that the UAE and Bahrain and others are really seeing Israel as a place to really focus on when it comes to researching this virus, how to protect against it. So I think this could be very much a war and peace because in the end, we're seeing that there are common threats, common challenges, and a common future for both peoples.
Dr. Yonatan Freeman, good to have you with us as always.